If you are interested in harnessing the full power and potential of astrology to shape change in your own life and the world around you, keep watching. My name is Alina, and I am the astrologer for creatives and change makers. Today we are talking about the moon. The moon is super foundational for astrology. So much of astrological thinking is actually based around moon cycles. And of course, the moon is one of the two luminaries, one of the big bodies that light up the sky. That's what the luminary is. The luminary is either the sun or the moon, the biggest, brightest planets, what they're considered in astrology, in the sky. So it's super important to understand each planet on its own terms. There are a lot of videos out there where they will tell you this is what the moon in Aries means and what the moon in Gemini means, and I'm not going to do that in this video. In this video, we're going to focus on getting to the essential essence of what is the moon's nature. And if you are interested in deepening your studies in astrology, I think that this is a good approach to take, to first understand each of the planets on their own, and then understand each of the zodiac signs on their own, and then through understanding the deepest, most essential nature of the qualities of these things, the houses, the aspects too, then you'll be able to actually understand how to apply these symbols in your own life and make the meaning out of them that will actually start to stir up and change things on a deep level for you. It would be as if you were trying to learn French, and so you went to France and you took a translator with you, and that's just never going to hit quite the same as if you were able to speak French and have the conversations with the people there in your own way and understand their language, their culture in their own terms directly. So I'm interested in getting you into this sort of direct, unfacilitated experience with the symbols of astrology, starting with the moon. I'm going to go through each planet in this series, so stick with me, subscribe if you're interested in following me through on that journey. So, the moon, in its most basic significations, what the moon is associated with would be the body, the emotions, the mother. It is the luminary that comes out at night, so people associate it with being the sort of more private aspects of who you are. The sun is more like what you radiate into the world, the light that you shine, the way that people see you. And the moon is more of almost an internal or private light, the way that you show up in relationships, in more private settings. It's a little bit more intimate. People don't see you at night as often as they see you during the day. Of course, this is going to make a big difference whether or not you were born during the day or at night. Oftentimes, people who were born at night actually identify more with their moon sign, and this is when we get into Sect, or looking at day charts or night charts. You might check that out for yourself, looking at your birth time, and if you're born at a time where you're like, I don't know if this was the day or night, maybe if it's around sunrise or sunset, you can look at your actual chart, and if you see the ascendant, descendant axis, there's this line that goes across the chart. If the sun is above this axis, that's generally considered a day chart, and if the sun is below this axis, that's generally considered a night chart. So if your sun is very close to the ascendant or descendant, if you're very close to the sunrise or sunset time for that day, then it can be a little bit tricky. Then you might have to sort of think about it, because if the sun is below the ascendant, but it is just barely below the ascendant right before sunrise, sometimes it's still actually bright out. So it's more about the subjective experience of if it feels like a daytime or if it feels like nighttime, so you can sort of look at your chart and see what makes sense for you in your chart. In a more psychological sense, people also talk about the moon as being related more to the subconscious, where the sun is more the ego. So sometimes the moon qualities can be a little bit more hidden than the sun qualities. So when we look at interpreting the moon as the mother, for instance, I might ask you if you experienced your mother similar to the zodiac sign that your moon is in. So for instance, if you had an Aries moon, then I might wonder if you experienced your mother to have sort of a warrior energy, which is sort of the archetype of Aries. And it's not that the moon is literally your mother, it's your experience of your mother, because the totality of who your mother is is not just a mother. She's not just a mother. She's got all other parts of her life and who she is before you were born. That's just one part of who she is. And that part is, again, not even the way that she experienced herself as a mother, not her idea of her mothering, but because astrology is all about our subjective experience from our point of view, it's your experience of your mother in ways that you might have received her or perceived her in your childhood or to this day. And again, this is going to be your emotional body, so sort of the way that you experience your emotions. So for instance, a fire moon might have a lot of physical energy. An air moon might tend towards intellectualizing the feelings. A earth moon might tend towards maybe even lethargy or comfort, sort of sensual pleasures, and having a real kind of grounded emotional presence. And a water moon will be swimming in the emotional waters, very easily merging, submerging in their own emotions and those of other people. But this is just general. We would have to look at the specific zodiac sign, of course, and lots of other stuff. But this is just sort of the general idea about how you can get into understanding the moon and how she operates. And as a representative of your physical body, this can again sort of represent the energy that you have and the way that you relate to food, the way you relate to your body, the amount of physical energy, athleticism that you have. And you would look at both the sign that the moon is in and also any aspects and also the houses to sort of really dive into that a little bit more. So the moon is very much the archetypal feminine in a way. Of all of the planets in astrology, we have only two that are feminine. That's the moon and Venus. So Venus is sort of the love, beauty, sensuality, romance, finer things, creativity, and the moon is more of this archetypal mother energy, this nurturing, emotional, supportive, soft, very earthy essence. It can also be extremely helpful to understand the planets through their opposites. So if you look at the zodiac wheel, I'll pull one up here, and you can also download this image through a link below if you're interested in blowing this up. I would recommend printing it out and having it as a reference. It's super helpful to be able to look at the zodiac wheel like this, to be able to see each of the symbols and signs and also the words, and just the symbol of this wheel in the way that I created it in this graphic has so much potent information. There's so much here that studying this alone will probably take you a while in the beginning of your studies, but I'm just going to dive into this one aspect of it here. So we can see here the moon rules Cancer. And therefore, what this sort of means is that Cancer, the zodiac sign Cancer, is an embodiment of the moon. Planetary rulership is extremely important in astrology. The way that ancient astrologers understood the zodiac was that each of the zodiac signs is sort of like its own kingdom. So there's this sky world, just like our world, but in the sky, that is divided into these different regions, these different countries, these different kingdoms that are the zodiac signs. And they each have their own culture, their own way of being, and they each have their own king or queen in this instance. The moon is feminine. So each of the planets rules one of these zodiac signs that is the kingdom, and for the moon rules Cancer. And the idea in astrology, the way the mythology plays out, is that these planets wander around the sky world. The planets move through the different zodiac signs, and wherever they find themselves, that sort of influences their character and the way that they act. So they might find themselves in a place that's particularly supportive to their nature, or they could find themselves somewhere a little bit difficult, more challenging, And then we can look at the aspects, which is sort of like the relationships between the characters. Are they fighting? Are they in a harmonious relationship? And this is the narrative that plays out in astrology that becomes the story of who you are. But of course, each of these symbols is a symbol. It's an archetype. It's not that there's only one way that this can manifest. So when we look at the moon as your mother, for instance, that's not going to necessarily land for everyone. Some people actually sort of identify like, so the sun is more like the father and the moon is more like the mother. But for some people, this is sort of switched. Some people experience their moon sign as more of the father and the sun sign as more of the mother. Usually this will work out in one of those two ways. And most often it's the moon is the mother and the sun is the father. But maybe depending on the relationship and your childhood, this could work out differently for different people. So this is another reason it's important to understand the essential essence and nature of each of these symbols, because not every delineation, not every signification, not every one of these meanings will apply to every situation in your life. So if you understand the multivalent nature of each of these symbols, then you can relate yourself directly to what part of your life this is resonating with and how it shows up for you uniquely, or if you're looking at the charts of other people, then the world and people around you. Okay, back to the zodiac wheel. So the moon rules Cancer, and we have Cancer right here at the bottom. Here's the moon. So each of these, this ring here is all of the planets, and then I have the label right here so you know which planet it is, and then the symbol of the sign, and also it written out in English so we can translate. I also have the element. So Cancer is a water sign. The moon is very watery. Of course, we understand the moon rules the ocean, literally the tides. The moon is very much connected to the water. Also ruling things like menstrual cycles for people who have them, and also things like fertility. Lots of mating cycles in nature are aligned with moon cycles in one way or another. So the moon is very much watery in essence. And in this literal way, like I was just talking about, the tides and menstruation and things like that, but also in this archetypally water way. So archetypally, water is connected to the emotions, the intuition, healing. Cancer is also a healer. The moon also has this healing energy. And the subconscious, the depths. The water is very interested in going into the depths, going deep within yourself and other people, and just sort of getting underneath of things. And for Cancer and the moon, often this is emotional. So like, let me connect with you on this really deep level. This would be the essence of Cancer as a manifestation of the moon, but also sort of the moon's natural inclination. But if the moon is found in a sign, like in an air sign, for instance, air signs are much more up here. They're not so much into the depths, not so emotional. They're more interested in what are we thinking about? What is interesting? What is intellectually stimulating? How can I be playful and social? So if the moon is found in an air sign, that might be a little bit more challenging for her, because she is wanting to be this deep emotional being, and the way that might play out for someone could be that maybe you tend to more intellectualize your feelings, that maybe you have a really strong understanding of emotions. Maybe you have a lot of emotional intelligence, but maybe it's not really felt. Maybe it's harder for you to really feel the feelings. So this would be especially like a Gemini or Aquarius moon, for instance, air signs. So anyway, we are going to get to this. The moon here is opposite Saturn ruled Capricorn. Cancer is opposite Capricorn. And everything is meaningful. There is symbolic significance to everything in this graphic. We can think about the moon through its opposite. So Saturn, the kind of essential function of Saturn is to say no, to set boundaries, to create structure. And these are things that Capricorns are very strong at. And so those are all things that are sort of opposite to the moon's nature. The moon is more of a merging. Let me merge with you, like emotional merging, especially when we think about Cancer or Pisces. These water signs tend to be very empathetic in this way that can blur boundaries between self and other, where you're connecting very deeply and you have this emotional, empathetic, nurturing connective ability that sort of can make it hard to distinguish between your own feelings and that of other people. This is more the nature of water. If you think about water, literally, it's going to just subsume and take the shape of the container that it's in. Water is not setting boundaries. Water is flowing, water is merging. So this is sort of the emotional nature of the moon. And we can see this in its opposite of Saturn, that is the structure, setting boundaries, saying no. The moon is more as a function saying yes. So there's two luminaries, the sun and the moon, that are both opposite to Saturn. So we have the moon opposite to Saturn in this Cancer-Capricorn axis, and then we have the sun ruling Leo, which is opposite to Saturn in this Aquarius Leo axis here. So Leo is very much a celebration of the self. The sun is the ego, the self, and the moon in that sort of opposition of the function of Saturn saying no and the sun saying yes. Leo and the sun is sort of saying yes to the self, celebrating the self, radiating the self, the ego, who you are, your essence into the world. This is Leo, this is the sun. And Saturn in this axis of Aquarius, which is opposite to Leo, is very much saying no to the self. Aquarius is much more interested in what is best for humanity. It doesn't really matter who I am what I need, like what's best for the collective. And in this Cancer-Saturn, this Cancer-Capricorn axis, Cancer in its function of saying yes is more saying yes to others, yes to supporting my family, to supporting my lover, to supporting my friends. How can I be nurturing and supportive to these people around me? Very much saying yes. And struggles to say no, to set boundaries, Cancer does. For other people, more so. It's hard for Cancer to say no to others, to say no in relationship, to disappoint. So we've gone through some of the big picture archetypal essences of Cancer and the moon and what the moon most essentially is. And now it could be good to get into some of the light and shadow sides of the moon. So like I have mentioned many times here, the moon is exceptionally good at healing, connecting, nurturing, supporting, very much loving, nourishing, nurturing, motherly energy. These are the strengths of the moon and of Cancer. On the shadow side, there's two sides to every archetype. Nothing is just good and nothing is just bad. So the shadow side of the moon can be that it can be difficult to set boundaries. Like I mentioned, it can be difficult to say no and also to sort of emotionally understand that the feelings of people around you are not your own. So this will be especially true if you Cancer Sun, Cancer Moon, just have a lot of Cancer placements in general. This can be an issue that comes up, that difficulty separating your own experience, your own emotions from those around you and feeling pulled towards saying yes to nurturing, to caretaking, and taking on things that aren't really yours to take on. Or maybe having an impulse to heal others that may not really be your work to do, but that can be hard to understand for a Cancer, for someone who's very much a moon person. Another shadow side of the moon is famous for its cycles. The moon loves to wax and wane, and it's the fastest moving planet of the Zodiac. So symbolically, metaphorically, this looks like what can sometimes be emotional volatility, having these emotional cycles, these ups and downs that can shift radically. This is something that comes up for Cancer a lot, or people who maybe have an afflicted moon, a moon that's not doing so well. For instance, if the moon is in a very good place, a good sign, a sign that is supportive of the type of energy the moon wants to bring into the world. If the moon has good relationships with the benefics, with Venus or Jupiter, these planets that want to say good things and do nice things for the other planets that they have positive relationships, that'll bring out more of these positive sides. And a moon that's very afflicted, that's maybe in a more challenging sign or in a relationship with one of the malefics that is Saturn or Mars, that have these more difficult, challenging things they want to bring into their relationships with other planets, then you might see more of this shadow side of the moon come out. In general, in society, I can speak to America mostly as an American, the moon is not an energy that we really celebrate or support so much. So I think if you are a very strongly moon-oriented person, have a very strong moon energy within you, or even just watery, water also is not a quality that's so much supported or celebrated here, that we have a much more sort of masculine fire air type of society. So I think it can be difficult for the moon to really express herself fully, and Cancers in general, and be supported in the way that they would like to be in the world. Another thing that you might like to look at is the moon cycle that you were born under. If you were born under a waxing or a waning moon, a full moon, or a new moon. Oftentimes you might notice that people born under a waxing moon, when the moon is still growing, working towards a full moon, are people who might have more physical energy, the moon as a manifestation of the physical body and your physical energy. And people born under a waning moon might have a little bit less of that vitality physically. But it'll depend on a lot of other things, of course, like I keep saying. Understanding the moon cycle is also foundational to so much of astrological thinking. So in case you're not familiar with moon cycle symbolism, the new moon, this is when the sun and moon are in the same place in the sky. This is when it looks like there's no moon. This represents a new beginning, planting the seed, a new cycle. The full moon is when the sun and moon are opposite. This represents the culmination, the manifestation, the peak. We are harvesting the fruit at this point, symbolically. So reaching sort of the peak of whatever that seed that was planted during the new moon. And then the waning phase is sort of the dissemination period. So we're spreading our fruit out, we're sharing, we're letting everyone know what we have learned, and then in the last quarter, more so preparing for a new cycle. This is the general symbolism for the moon cycle. New moon, planting the seed, a new cycle, waxing, building up towards what will be the peak, the culmination, the manifestation, and then disseminating our knowledge, whatever happened from that, and getting ready to start a new cycle again. So this way of thinking, you can look at any two planets. For instance, maybe you would look at Mercury, Saturn, and when Mercury and Saturn come together, that's the beginning of their cycle during the conjunction, and then they reach some sort of peak during the opposition when Mercury becomes opposite to Saturn, and then a new Mercury-Saturn cycle happens when they come back together again. It can also be really interesting to look at if you were born under an eclipse. This is another special feature of the moon, that eclipses happen with the moon. So an eclipse is when we have a new moon or a full moon that is in alignment with the nodes, also known as the ecliptic in astronomy. So an eclipse is sort of just like an exclamation point, like a big woof on top of the new moon or full moon energy. So it'll be similar symbolism to the new and full moon, but just extra kind of like blown up, bold, all caps, exclamation points of whatever that is. So if you were born under an eclipse, usually this could mean that eclipses will have special significance when they come around, that you may be affected by eclipses more so than other people. Being born under a new moon or a full moon in general can mean that maybe you are sort of destined to, under a new moon, initiate a new cycle, that you are meant to kind of start a new chapter in some way, depending on what house the moon is located in and other things happening in the chart. We can sort of try to figure out what that symbolism means for you and the cycle that you are initiating in your life. And with the full moon, maybe you are sort of at a peak visibility, that you're meant to be seen or really manifest something. And again, this will depend on the house placement, and can also just give you like a lot of energy. If you ever worked in schools or hospitals or things, you know that during the full moon, energy is just frenetic and buzzing, and there's just a lot of activity, so that can just kind of give you an imprint, that full moon like electric buzz into who you are in your life in some way. So we talked about aspects to the moon a little bit, Especially, you would look at the relationship that the moon has to the benefics, Jupiter and Venus, for some extra positive, maybe moon energy, or some aspects to the malefics, the Saturn, Mars planets that are doing more challenging things, and that can give us more information about the quality of the moon, your emotional body, your mother, your subconscious, the way you show up in relationships. We can also look at the house placement of the moon. So, for instance, if your moon is located in the 6th, 8th, or 12th house, that can especially be people that oftentimes don't really relate to the moon energy so much. They're dark houses in ancient astrology. So these are houses that don't aspect the ascendant, which essentially means they're not places that have a relationship to the self. So sometimes planets that are found here can indicate qualities that you don't relate to as much, or the zodiac sign there can be an archetype that you don't relate to as much. So if you've ever felt like, I don't know if I'm like my moon sign at all, that doesn't sound like me, you might check out what house it's in. Also, if you have a day chart, you might not identify with the moon sign so much. If you have the moon in the 3rd house, this is the place where the moon has its joy. So the 3rd house in ancient astrology was called the house of the goddess. The 3rd house has to do with things like divination, communication, short distance travel, elementary, like younger grade school, your community, your neighborhood, things happening around you. So if you have the moon in the 3rd house, then you might feel especially fluid and comfortable in these parts of life. Oftentimes people with the moon in 3rd house could also be, with the moon being the body and the 3rd house being kind of short distance travel, getting around people who might really enjoy road trips or might be very interested in dancing, kind of using their body in these ways. And this will again depend on the sign that the 3rd house is, that the moon is in for you. But that is a place where the moon is especially happy. That's where the moon has its joy. Maybe I should mention as well that the moon is ruling Cancer. So this is the place where the queen is in her queendom. In the sign of Cancer, this is the moon's favorite place. It is also exalted in Taurus, the sign of Taurus, so the moon is very, very happy in Taurus. It is a lovely place for the moon. Taurus is an earth sign, very grounded, stable, and the moon also loves earthy things, being an archetypal feminine. Both the earth and water are feminine elements. Air and fire are masculine elements. And Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is the other feminine planet, doing nice, lovely feminine things. So the moon is very happy here. People with the moon in Taurus often are very connected to the earth, have a nice grounded, stable emotional energy, just really enjoy sensual, fine comfort things, food, coziness, gardening, things like that. So that's a very nice place for the moon. And a more challenging place for the moon, like I talked about, could be Capricorn. The moon is in detriment in Capricorn. So this is a more challenging place, like we talked about. Capricorn is opposite to Cancer, opposite to the moon's home, has an opposite nature to what the moon wants to do and how Cancer is. So that's a more challenging place for the moon potentially. Although people with a Capricorn moon oftentimes have can be very spiritual, but it's often something that they struggle with, especially when they are younger, and as they're older sort of develop more of a relationship with this kind of more spiritual, mystical side to them, I find oftentimes. But there's just a harshness to Capricorn that does not really suit the moon's nature or what she wants to do. So there can be some difficulty around emotions sometimes for a Capricorn moon, or difficulties regarding the mother, as the moon is also often indicative of the relationship you might have had with your mother or your experience of her. So maybe some harshness, punishing, distant, maybe like removed vibes from the mom. But there are many different ways that all of these things can play out. This is just giving you a general understanding. There's lots of nuance to unpack with all of it. And if you would like me to do a video where I go through each of the moon signs, let me know in the comments, because I can do that. But I think that first off, it's important that everyone understand the planets on their own terms, their essential nature, so that way you can have a direct relationship, direct connection to these symbols and just really tap into what they mean for you. And once you understand the multivalent nature of these symbols, then you can start to apply them to your own chart and make your own delineations and understand in your own way, which will just make the power so much stronger that astrology can offer you as a tool for transformation. But if you're interested in having some guidance on that journey, I do offer astrology consultations for 60 or 90 minutes. 60 minutes will get into who you are, the birth chart as a symbol of your personality, different aspects of your life, potential strengths and weaknesses. In 90 minutes, we go through all of that with also talking about your timing, things that you can expect coming up in your future, how we can connect things you've experienced in your past to predicting future events. I also get into more of your purpose, what astrology suggests could be sort of peaks in your career. We look at the timing for career things, looking at the year ahead, the year now. So there's just sort of a lot more kind of techniques that I start to apply when I do all of my analysis. And both of these readings involve 15 to 20 pages of write-up that you can keep forever to understand the birth chart in the way that I use astrology, and you can take notes and you get a recording so you can refer back to all of these things, and they really do keep giving. And the more that you relate to the symbols, the more every time you look back and try to understand more deeply and with more nuance the different pieces of it, it really does come alive more and just offer you more awareness and therefore control of your own life. So if that sounds interesting to you, there's a link to my website below to book a consultation with me. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments. I will definitely respond to all the comments. And if you're interested to hear more about my philosophy and approach as someone who studied physics and then became an astrologer, I also have a video that I will put right here that is about how I understand astrology through this lens of modern science and psychology, and trying to really get to the bottom of how it really works and why it works, because I feel that I'm uniquely positioned to answer these questions as someone who has been trained formally in the sciences. So hope you enjoy and be well.